Welcome to another in our series of Kehillat Israel podcasts. This is a recording of Rabbi Amy Bernstein's weekly Friday morning Torah study.
So we are in the part of the Joseph narrative where we are coming to the big moment of Joseph coming out. What's happened before now? His family's starving in Canaan. They come down as they were wont to do in Canaan. When Canaan was having a drought, they would come down to northern Egypt. Why is there not a drought in northern Egypt if there's a drought in Canaan? The Nile. So Canaan is fed by rain. The Egyptian agricultural system was based on the Nile, overflowing its banks. And so often there was food in Egypt when there was no food in Canaan. So it was normal for people to come down and work in northern Egypt, and or in this case, because our family of Jacob is wealthy, they just needed to be able to purchase food. Right? So think of food lines in Russia. It doesn't matter how wealthy you are if there's no food in the grocery store for you to buy with your wealth. So that's what's happening here. There's nothing on the shelves. So they're coming down. They came down to. They heard there was plenty of food in Egypt. Why was there plenty of food in Egypt?
They had prepared because of Joseph's dream, or interpreting the Pharaoh's dream.
So in our case, there is actually a famine in Egypt as well. Usually, it could be different because of rain versus the Nile. But in our case, there's a famine in Egypt. But Joseph, having interpreted the Pharaoh's dreams correctly, saved from the crops that had been healthy and extremely successful, and saved food in silos in order to feed the population in the 7 years of famine. We're in the 7 years of famine, and there's food in Egypt because of Joseph. So the brothers know this. They come down with their money to buy grain. Joseph figures out who they are. He knows who they are. And so he says, I don't believe you. He asks a little bit about them. He figures out who they are. And then he says, I don't believe you that you're here to buy grain. I think you're spies. Here to spy on the military strength of Egypt.
He acts as an Egyptian.
He is dressed as an Egyptian. He speaks in Egyptian with an interpreter.
So he changed coats again.
He has been in this coat for a while now, but yes, he is once again in costume. Right? For Joseph, it's all about clothing and what he looks like. We're going to read a little bit of Peter Pitzela and what he has to say about that. So this is a costume in a sense, but in another sense, it really is who Joseph is. Like Joseph is like the orphan. He has no place that he fits. He's a stranger everywhere. He's a stranger to his brothers. He's a stranger in Egypt. He's the second in command to Pharaoh, but really he's not Egyptian. Right? I mean, he's really very much always out of place.
It's more than a costume. It's like a disguise.
In this case, it's definitely going to become a disguise. A costume may be existentially what it is. It's going to become a disguise.
He's a symbol. He's sold in a way.
Right. Misfit. Don't belong anywhere. Do what you got to do. Right? It's very much a Jewish story, the story of Joseph.
Why would Joseph see these brothers? I can't imagine that everybody who is coming to purchase or work for food would have a meet and greet with Joseph.
Either because they're wealthy, right? They're coming to procure a lot of grain. Presumably Joseph is chief over the distribution system, so possibly he's checking on, the main distribution center. For some reason, he encounters them. He's in charge of the entire system of distributing grain.
Did he really think they were spies, or did he recognize that they were?
He knew that he uses this because Benjamin's not with them. Benjamin is his only full brother. Who's Benjamin the son of? Rachel. Rachel dies, giving birth to Benjamin. So Benjamin is with Jacob because Jacob won't let him go with them because he's already lost Joseph. And so he won't let Benjamin go. So Joseph says to them, prove to me you're not spies. Go get your youngest brother. You said there were 11 of you. Go get the youngest one and bring him here, or we're not doing any business. So they purchase the grain. They're going back to get Benjamin. When they discover on their way home, they discover the money they paid in their sacks of grain. So now it appears that they've stolen the grain.
Whoa.
Right. So Joseph instructed this to happen. Joseph instructed his people to put the money back in the grain sacks, to flip the brothers out, and to frame them.
Yeah.
So that's all happening. Now they got to convince Jacob to let Benjamin go with them, which they do. I'm catching us up to here. We're coming up to where we are right here. And finally, it's Judah who stands up and says, I will be surety for Benjamin. If something happens to me, something happens to him, my life is forfeit, essentially. Remember, in the intervening period, Judah has lost a couple of sons, right? The whole incident with Tamar has happened. So Judah's changed. Judah's grown. Judah gets why Jacob feels the way he does about Benjamin and says, I will be surety for him. So he legally takes on the role of protector whose life is forfeit if something happens to Benjamin. All right. So this is one of the longer stories in Torah, as you can see. It takes up fully a quarter of the book of Genesis. It is a novella inside Genesis. This is not just a couple of episodes. This is an entirely structured novella that is stuck at the end of Genesis. All right, so we are at the point where Jacob says, okay, verse 14, may El Shaddai dispose the man mercifully towards you, that he may release to you your other brother as well as Benjamin. Remember, Joseph keeps somebody as collateral that they'll return. All right, so here, this is the moment that they come back, right? All right. Wait. Okay. So somebody start reading at 15.
The men then took this offering of the silver, right? The offering is the silver?
Yeah.
Okay. And taking in hand the double portion of silver, along with Benjamin, they got going and went down to Egypt and stood before Joseph. When Joseph saw Benjamin with them, he said to the one in charge of his household, bring the men into the house and slaughter an animal and prepare it, for these men are going to eat with me at noon. The man did as Joseph said. The man brought the men into Joseph's house. The men were frightened when they were brought into Joseph's house. They thought, it is on account of the silver that came back in our bags the first time that we're being brought here, in order to fall upon us, to pounce on us, to take us as slaves along with our asses. They therefore approached the man in charge of Joseph's household and spoke to him at the entrance of the house, saying, by your leave, my lord, the last time we came down to buy food, when we got to the night lodging and opened our bags, each one silver was in the mouth of his bag, the exact amount that had been weighed out. And we have brought it back with us. And we have brought other money to buy food. We don't know who put our silver in our bags. He replied, you're all right, have no fear. Your God and your father's God has given you a hidden treasure in your bags. Your money reached me. And he brought Simeon out to them.
Okay. So they pack up, they take Benjamin, they make their way down to Egypt, so figure a couple of weeks, it's not like next day, right? So they travel. Torah's not interested in the travel, in the journey, right? They get to Egypt, and they present themselves, right, to the officials who represent Joseph. But Joseph sees that Benjamin is with them, and says to his steward, take them into my house and prepare an animal, for we're going to have a feast. They're dining with me, right, at the big meal of the day. And so he does that. But you can imagine the brothers are freaking out. Like, they show up, they've been framed for theft, and now they're being told they're being taken into the private palace of the vizier. They're just there to buy grain.
What?
right? So they're flipping out, and they think it must be because of the money that was in their sacks. And that once they get into the palace, they won't leave the palace, right? That they'll be taken in as thieves, or their person will be in exchange for the money, whatever it is. They're convinced that they're going to forfeit their freedom.
Saudi Arabia, we're talking
Yeah, right.
Maybe they're thinking that
Same region, my friend. same origins, same cultural origins.
maybe they think they're being rewarded for confessing that the money was in the bag.
No, they are terrified. They say he's going to attack us and seize us and fall upon us and make us slaves and then take all of our Hummers. So they're convinced this is bad, right?
The humpers, the camels.
Right. Yes, the pack animals.
How much time, if you have any idea of that, has passed between the time that Joseph originally came to Egypt and this meeting?
Like 20 years?
So they maybe don't recognize him because he's...
For sure they don't recognize him. For sure. He was a young teenager. He was like 13.
Right.
And now 20 years have passed. He's in his 30s and he's decked out. Imagine the eye makeup. Imagine the headdress.
Oh, yeah.
Like think ancient Egypt, very important person. He's jewelry gold jewelry everywhere. He's dressed as a dignitary of Egypt. He's second in charge to Pharaoh.
But he
so they have no
recognizes
reason to recognize him.
But he knows who they are.
Yes. There's 11 of them, right? Their father's name is Jacob. Like he asked about them and he recognizes them.
Memory then of his past.
Mm-hmm.
He has memory of his past.
For sure.
He was almost killed.
For sure. They almost killed him. So if you want to talk about what stays in the brain,
That
right?
would.
Anything around a trauma, right, goes like a dagger into the deepest part of the brain. That's how we've survived, right? So for sure.
I was just thinking that, over the years that have passed, even physically he had changed and they may not have recognized him.
For sure.
Even if he weren't all that down.
For sure. He was a youth and now he's a man. For sure. They have
Expecting him to be dead.
right. They think he's a slave somewhere, right? Because they sold him into slavery. So 100% they don't know who he is. I mean, unless you want to be the rabbis and look at midrashim, right? Like the rabbis are going to have a lot of midrashim. Maybe they knew, okay. But we're not going there. All right. So they go to Joseph's house steward because they want to confess about the money to head off any danger that someone thinks they're trying to get away with it, right? They want to return the money. They want to get rid of it. They're desperate to get rid of this silver.
And they actually told the truth.
And they told the truth, right? So we came down to procure food. When we did that, when we were going back, we opened our bags and the money was in there. We don't know who put the money in our bags. They're freaking out about what he's about to say. And what he says is, don't know what you're talking about. I got your payment. Your God must have arranged for you to get a nice little discount. You got the grain for free. I got your payment. So they have to be a little confused, right? So Joseph is
He's playing again.
He's playing with them, right? He's setting them up to be anxious and fearful and
As he was.
off balance as he was, to see what they will do. But we don't know that he's decided that yet.
They could have just stayed home with the grain and the money and let Simeon.
Correct.
So that's a test.
Correct. So test number 1 is, will they come back for Simeon? And will they risk bringing Benjamin? 100%. So we don't know if he's done. We don't know what's happening in Joseph's mind, right? We don't know if he kind of thinks of this along the way, or if he's got all this mapped out. Torah doesn't tell us. All right. So I got your payment, and he goes and he brings Simeon out. Okay, Bert.
The men then ushered the men into Joseph's house. He supplied water, and they washed their feet, and he gave fodder to their asses. They laid out the offering for the arrival of Joseph at noon, for they had heard that they would eat food there. When Joseph entered the house, they presented to him the offering they had brought into the house, and they bowed down before him to the ground. He asked them how they were, and said, "How is your aged father, of whom you spoke? Is he still alive? They said, your servant, our father, is well. He is still alive. And they knelt and bowed down. He looked up and saw his full brother Benjamin, his mother's son, and he said, is this your youngest brother you told me about? And he added, God be gracious to you, my son. Joseph hurried out, for he was so deeply stirred with tender warmth towards his brother that he wanted to weep. He went into an inner chamber, and there he wept. He washed his face, and when he came out, he held himself in check and said, serve food. They served him separately and then separately, and the Egyptians who usually ate with him separately, for the Egyptians could not eat food with the Hebrews since it was an abomination to the Egyptians.
Go ahead.
Mind going?
Yeah.
As they were seated before him, the firstborn according to his seniority, and the youngest according to his youth, the men looked at each other in amazement. He presented portions of food to them from what was in front of him. Benjamin's portion exceeded all of theirs fivefold, and they drank and grew drunk with him.
All right. So they come into the house, and Simeon's with them, and they put out everything that they're gonna give. They've brought gifts for Joseph. They lay everything out because they've been told they're going to be there, right, to eat at this huge banquet. And when Joseph comes home, they give him the gifts, and they do the proper thing. They bow low to the ground, right, in obeisance. He greets them, and the first thing he asks about is his father, right? So, how is your father, of whom you spoke? What was your translation of the rest of that verse?
Is he still alive?
Interesting. Very interesting.
How is your aged father whom you speak? Is he still alive?
Okay, yeah. So, Hashalom avichem. He's asking after the shalom of his father. Mm-hmm. Right? So in Hebrew we still say, Ma shlomcha. How's your shalom? That's how you ask about someone's well-being. So, Ma shlomcha, he asks after the shalom of his father. And then some commentators want to say he catches himself that he's tripped up. Because how does he know that Jacob's still alive? Right? Like he's making that assumption. How's dad? And it's like, is your father still living?
Yeah.
Right? So some people want to say he gets it that he almost exposed too much, but whatever. He asks after his father, because you can imagine he is desperate to know about his father. And they said he's still in good health. And they bow again, maybe because they're acknowledging how gracious it is of the vizier of Egypt to ask after their father. And so then he looks around and his eyes find Benjamin, right? His only full sibling who he has not seen since, presumably, Benjamin was little. And when he realizes, right, he says, is this your youngest brother, right, to be sure that this is Benjamin. And they acknowledge that it is, and he immediately, right, offers words of blessing to Benjamin. May God be gracious to you. And with that, he leaves the room. This is a very rare occurrence in Torah that we get any mention of someone's emotional state. It is very, very rare in Torah. So it tells us this is a big deal that Torah's writing this for us. Usually Torah's not interested in what people are feeling. It's about what's happening. And so, it's a Western modern approach to be concerned with the inner life of the character in terms of what you write about. You might discuss it around the campfire, like what was Sarah feeling, or what was up with Hagar, right? They might talk about it, but when you wrote that material down, they were not interested in the inner life of the characters, so that we get this sense that he is completely overwhelmed. So he has to leave the room because it says Vayivakesh leave coat. He was a fixin' to cry, right? That's the closest I can get in English. He was fixing to cry.
Here it says he was deeply stirred with tender warmth.
Rachmav. So actually it is Nichmeru Rachmav. His compassion, his Rachmanis was heated up. Al Achiv, towards his brother. Vayivakesh livkot, and he was fixing to cry. And so he goes to another room. Vayef kshama, and he weeps in that room.
According to the text, has to do with Benjamin.
Yes.
This is his.
But I can imagine that the whole thing is, being an adoptee. Like, if my birth family were to just show up in front of me, I mean, like he hasn't seen them in 20 years, and I mean, so it's just he's got to be just like all over the place. But yes, when he sees Benjamin, that does it. Like he can't hold it together.
He wasn't playing a role for that moment.
He was a real person experiencing real emotion. It's got to be very complicated. They tried to kill him. His last vision of them was them looking in the pit at him, right? And then, selling him into slavery. So, I mean, it's got to be so incredibly mixed at this moment. And Benjamin was innocent. So he is the only, and so figure Benjamin and Dinah are the only two siblings who are innocent. And he's not seeing Dinah. She's not there, right? So, so Benjamin is the only one to whom he has an unadulterated love for. Both because it's Rachel's other son. Remember, Benjamin's birth kills Joseph's mother. That has to be a complicated relationship.
Is it love, but also a longing to belong?
I think there's so much we could cover both sides of this board. I think with what's happening to Joseph right now in this moment.
Didn't he have a dream that his brothers would bow down to him?
Of course. That's what got him in trouble.
And they keep on bowing down to him.
Right? It's like, because we who know the story know when he says that what's going to happen. Right?
And the irony that now he's in control. They were in control in his previous situation. He's in control now.
Right.
And he's got to be feeling a sense of joy in that. I mean, they can't hurt him now.
I would
But
I think
when you
got to be there.
So when one confronts one's abuser, and now one is safe from the abuser, it
wouldn't be joy.
I don't know. Like relief for sure.
Yes.
But he's been safe from them for 20 years. Now he's confronted with them, and all that brings up in terms of when he wasn't safe. I must imagine.
But it wouldn't bring up love for them necessarily. For Benjamin, yes. And Dinah,
right. So we don't know. We don't know. That's I think the beauty of this moment is that there's so much going on, and all we know is that he's overwhelmed.
The tears could be released.
Exactly. He's got to go cry. Mm-hmm. All right. I see several hands. Audrey?
I maybe all along. Were Benjamin and Dinah born after Joseph left? It was kicked out and thrown in the pit. They were still there. They were there when he.
Yes. Robert?
But Benjamin was the innocent one.
But does he know of Joseph? Does he know of Joseph?
Sure.
Well, I think what he knows is that he had an older brother who was ripped apart by animals.
But there's one of the things you mentioned earlier that's going on for sure. And he set a trap. He set this most difficult trap, the most important trap he could imagine, because the brothers said, "Oh, please don't make us bring Benjamin." I mean, this big long tale about nothing.
It'll kill our father.
It'll kill our father to death. I mean, no, because he worked very hard to make this as big a test as he could think to make it. You don't, and they brought it. So it was setting. It was trap is almost the wrong word. It was a test to see if these people changed. I can't think of any better way to test whether they have changed. Whether they're going to leave Simeon and then go and come back and bring Benjamin.
Right, and it ain't over.
Which they did. So
it ain't over. Right? So, has he mapped all of it out? Or is he thinking about this at each stage? We don't know, but it ain't over yet. So
he didn't have to have anything to do with it, though.
Huh?
He didn't have to have anything to do with them. He could have just sold them the grain and
But that's
Forget
not,
it and
that's
never
not
see
the
him
story.
again. No.
There's no story there.
What I'm saying is he chose to engage with them.
Yes,
is what I'm saying.
That's the story.
Yeah.
That's the whole, of course. Or else there's no drama.
But if you're a victim,
if
you're a victim, you get a chance to confront
the abuser.
The abuser. You want to do that. You want to see, particularly after 20 years.
Right. So here we go. Let's go. So he sets it up so that he's going to totally screw with them, right? So what does he do? They come into the house. He tells his people to serve the meal. They will be eating separately. Mm-hmm. They're eating alone. The Egyptians are eating alone, and Joseph is eating alone. So the Egyptians won't eat with Hebrews because that is to'eva. That's an abomination to the Egyptians. So it just shows that abomination is in the eyes of the culture, right? We always get all flipped out when we see abomination in the Torah. Well, guess what? The Egyptians have the exact same word and the exact same taboo associated with certain things. So they won't sit with the Hebrews. So they're sitting alone. They're seated, and their seats are assigned. And their seats are assigned from oldest to youngest.
Yeah.
They look around the table and go, this is weird. Right? Yeah. Right. How are they seated by the Egyptians in birth order?
Right. How do they know?
And then when Benjamin's food comes, he is served 5 times as much food as the rest of the... Right? He gets the fillet part of the T-bone. Right? It's very obvious that he's being favored. But they have to be looking at each other going, what up? Yeah. This is just, it's gone from the sublime to the ridiculous. They are just they have to be freaking out. It's getting worse.
The music comes.
Right? The violins. So they're freaking out. But they have no choice but to behave as if they are honored to be in the house of the palace of the vizier, being served a banquet. So they eat and they drink. They're gonna do what they have to do to act like they're at the party. They're not stupid, right? All right. So then 44. Well, it's more like V'yishkaru imo. They drank alcohol with him. So what it's saying is, if you go to a cocktail party and someone says, "Can I get you a drink?" the only right answer is yes. Yeah. Right? I mean, now I guess politically you can say I don't drink, but right. Traditionally, if it's a banquet and there's wine and there's whatever alcohol, I don't know that it's wine, that it's alcohol. What it's saying is they had to participate. Yes. They knew they had to. It's I don't know what I'm saying, but it's like if you go to a Druze village and they offer you tea or coffee, you say yes. Mm-hmm. Saying no is an insult to your host. It's not about they wanted to. It's about they know they have to. They needed a drink. They're like making a double. Bert, 44.
Afterward, he commanded the one in charge of his household, saying, "Fill the men's bags with food, as much as they can carry, and put each man's silver in the mouth of his bag. And put my goblet, the silver goblet, in the mouth of the youngest one's bag, along with silver for his grain." He did just as Joseph instructed. At morning light, the men were sent off, they and their asses. They had left the city, but had not gone far, when Joseph said to the one in charge of his household, "Get going, pursue the men. When you overtake them, say to them, 'Why did you repay good with evil? This is what my master drinks from, and with which he constantly practices divination. Have you not caused harm by what you have done?' He overtook them and spoke all these words to them, and they said to him, 'Why is my Lord speaking such words? Far be it from your servants to do such a thing. Look, we brought you back the silver that we found in the mouth of our bags all the way from the land of Canaan. Why would we steal silver or gold from your master's house? Let anyone caught with it among your servants die, and we for our part will become my Lord's slaves.' He replied, 'Yes, right away, just as you say, so shall it be.' But while he who is caught with it shall be my slave, the rest of you shall be cleared. They hastened to lower their bags to the ground, and each opened his bag. He began searching with the eldest and ended with the youngest until he found the goblet in Benjamin's bag. They tore their mantles. Each then reloaded his ass, and they went back to the city.
All right. They just had this lovely banquet. Everybody's had a little to drink. Everybody's feeling pretty good. They got their grain. They're going home. They got Simeon. They got Benjamin. Right? So, right? Joseph's like, fill their bags with food as much as they can carry, meaning all of their donkeys can carry, right? Like, it's a huge amount of grain. But put my special silver goblet in Benjamin's sack. And their money. So once again, they're going to discover, right, their money, but it's way worse this time. So in the first thing in the morning, they have their pack animals, everything's loaded, and they had not gotten far out of the city before Joseph's steward, right, says, go get them, go, and search their bags because my master's divination cup is gone. So we don't know if Joseph is actually practicing divination or if he just knows that Egyptians do that, and so they're going to assume he does. So whether it's hydromancy, oleomancy, using water or oil, you have one substance in the cup and you add another substance, and then you read the surface.
Like tea leaves.
Yes. So we don't know, but some the rabbis get a little nervous about, oh my God, was Joseph practicing divination? God forbid. So he says, how could you repay my master like this? Right? That's just terrible. Like, he treated you so well and feasted you, and how could you repay him like this? And okay, so all right, Amy, stay focused. Okay, so. And they're like, what are you talking about? What are you talking about? We would never do anything like that. Right? We brought back the money that we found in our sacks. If we wanted to steal from you, we would have done it already. Like, we came here to give you back your money. Why would we now take somebody's cup? What are you talking about? So much so that they say, you know what? If somebody here has the cup, right?
And guess who has it?
His life is forfeit. And okay, so whichever of your servants is found with it shall die, right? The rest of us will become your slaves because we didn't take it.
Turnabout fair play.
So out comes that statement, and of course then they search, they put their bags down, and the guy says, nope, the only person who will be dealing with any problems is the person who has the cup. They lower their bags, and it is found in Benjamin's sack. So now, right, you can imagine. Like, this is the absolute worst thing that could happen, is that something's going to happen to Benjamin. It's the worst. This is absolutely the worst. All right, 14.
Judah and his brothers entered Joseph's house. He was still there. They fell to the ground before him. Joseph said to them, what is this deed that you have done? Did you not know that a man like me constantly practices divination?
God forbid.
Judah replied, what can we say to my Lord? How speak and how justify ourselves? God has found out the iniquity of your servants. Here we are, my Lord's slaves, both we and the one who was caught with the goblet in his possession. But he said, far be it from me to do this. The man in whose possession the goblet was found, he shall be my slave, and the rest of you go up in peace to your father.
Dun, 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 dun. So, notice what they've done here. What did they say? They said, if you find it, then let whoever is found with it die. And the rest of us will become your slaves voluntarily. What do they say here when they're before Joseph?
We'll be your slaves.
That they'll all be slaves.
We'll all be your slaves.
Don't kill him.
Don't kill him. They don't dare say, but they're gonna zip it about having ever said anything about dying, right? No dying, slaves, no dying, right? So they say, we're going to be your slaves. Joseph wasn't there when they said, let the one found with it die. All he hears is, right, we're going to be your slaves, and he says, I'm a man of honor. I'm the vizier of Egypt. I would never, ever take free people into slavery who haven't done anything, right? Only Benjamin. The rest of you are free to go. And when he says free to go, right, it doesn't mean free to go, right? It means I'll be keeping Benjamin. You need to leave. Time to go. Time to go, as we say where I'm from. Time to go. So Torah leaves us there. This is the end of a parsha. Torah leaves us here. No idea like what's going to be, but we have this moment, this incredibly tension-filled, dramatic moment where Joseph is still disguised, and he has set up the ultimate test for them. I'm going to keep Benjamin. The rest of you need to get out of here while you can.
But what I don't get is, if he wants to get revenge against the bad brother, and he has nothing against Benjamin, why is he going to put Benjamin through this horrific experience of having these guys come out and say, we found this cup in your bag, and he brings him back, even if it was to reconnect with Benjamin in some way? He's still putting him through this horrific experience for someone who's done nothing to him.
He's really getting back at the brothers.
Well, but what's he doing to Benjamin? Even just for that time from riding back from Canaan to Egypt, which may be days or weeks or whatever, he's in absolute fear of his life. And this is a guy who's done nothing to him.
Or he could be waiting for them to leave, and then he says to Benjamin, I'm your brother. It's us two against them.
But what I hear is it's still traumatic for Benjamin to be framed, right?
That's got to be the setup here.
So even if that's his intention, right? So the question is, why would he traumatize Benjamin like that? Answers?
The brothers know that that's the way, that's the thing that's going to kill their father.
So it seems, I think, whenever you have a screwed up family dynamic, and somebody's, I know we wouldn't know anything about that in this room, but whenever you have a really messed up family dynamic and there's trauma, nobody's safe. Nobody comes out unscathed. Joseph's behavior, he doesn't worry about Benjamin's feelings. He needs to get at his brothers. He needs to go to do the thing that will kill his father to see what they do. Take the most precious thing his father has, his full brother, which they could resent also the way they resented him. Because we don't know that Joseph knows why they hated him. We know, because he was a brat. And he kept saying, you're going to bow down to me, right? But he doesn't know that. Maybe they hate him because he's Rachel's son, the favorite wife's son. And so maybe they hate Benjamin too, right? So I just think when there's this much trauma and this much drama, people get hurt who are innocent. And Joseph is not well. Joseph is not whole. Joseph is scarred. Joseph is scarred. He's broken. He's damaged. And he winds up possibly traumatizing Benjamin.
But his intention is revenge. His intention is not...
I don't think his intention is revenge. I don't. I think his intention is to see who they have become. What is teshuvah? Teshuvah isn't accepted. You're not forgiven for a sin, say the rabbis, until you are put in exactly the same position to do exactly the same sin, and you don't do it. That's when teshuvah is complete. Joseph is looking for, under the exact same circumstances, right, or even worse, he's made it even more intense, right, that your lives are in danger if you don't get out of here, because you've been associated with a crime against me personally. He has set it up that they should leave, right? Like, if they're at all like who they were, they would leave. He sets it up to see who have these men become? What they did to him?
Will they do it?
Teach them. Did they learn from that? Did they change? Will they do it again? Putting them in serious danger and saying, all you have to do is leave me Benjamin. And you're fine. That's all you have to do. The rest of you are free.
Can we not see this as a rescue of the other favorite son? Because he probably sympathizes with Benjamin, and he wants to rescue him from these evil brothers.
I mean, I think for sure we know he feels desperately, tenderly towards Benjamin. There's this moment where Benjamin thinks he's about to lose his freedom. That's got to be traumatic, and maybe it's worth it for Joseph, right? If he's afraid for Benjamin's life, maybe it's worth it. Maybe he just doesn't care because he too is just broken and traumatized. Mark?
It goes on to say in the 16, what can we say to my Lord? God has found out the inequity of your servants. What does that mean?
They're confessing. They've been caught red-handed. They can't.
But just use the word God. God has found out. I'm just wondering. I get the confession. Mm-hmm. What can we say? God has found out.
Because it's typical language that the gods know. Like God knows the truth. Like I don't think it's as pointed as it might seem on the page to us.
The effect is
to say that God knows.
If you say something on your behalf, it's not as much worth as God is.
The inequity of your servants. Is that? I'm just confused by this.
Okay.
Does that mean they acknowledge that they didn't treat him properly?
No, they've been caught with the cup. Right. They're trying to take responsibility for the theft to get it off of Benjamin. So we are your servants, Joseph, Master. We are your servants, and clearly we messed up. So we are forfeiting our freedom, right? Because they're afraid of what's going to happen to Benjamin. And he says, nice try. I know what you're doing, right? No, I'm keeping Benjamin. Y'all are free to go. Yeah. You are dismissed.
And you can imagine them coming back in front of their father.
That's exactly what's being set up, is that they would have to go home and say, Dad?
Maybe is it possible that Joseph is just angry, so angry at Jacob for not protecting Joseph?
So it is
he wants to punish Jacob by keeping Benjamin.
It is a very interesting dynamic that does Joseph hold Jacob responsible at all for anything?
My father didn't protect me when I from harm.
We don't, we do not. One has to imagine, right, that there's levels of all of this happening, and or he could be idealizing Jacob, the father that he didn't get to grow up with. He was orphaned.
Why would he idealize him?
Because we don't have any indication that Jacob did anything except adore Joseph and fawn all over him and give him a tunic and adored him and loved him and in that sense kept him close to him. And does Joseph realize that behavior got him thrown into the pit? Don't know. But Joseph seems to understand. We've seen in other places, Joseph says, he's going to say at the end of the story, I was put here to save you. All of this happened so that I could save you from famine. And so Joseph gets to that place. He sends for Jacob. He wants Jacob to come down and live with him. So we don't have an indication that he feels anything except love and a missing of Jacob. Right? His father got taken from him. His father who doted on him. His son rose and set on him. Is taken from him.
Keeping Benjamin would convince Jacob to come to Egypt.
Well, he comes out to them. He comes out to them way before any of that happens.
Well, I was going to say, you've said a couple of times that Joseph is broken and flawed, and yes, there clearly is that. But there's the flip side of it too, in my mind, that through all that's happened to him, he never lost faith in himself. He never forgot the dream. He's prospered, and he prospered because he didn't just end up feeling sorry for himself the whole time. So my sense is that it sort of wouldn't occur to him that this, since he's always been so successful, that this plan that he sets up, this test that he sets up, keeping Benjamin, would have a bad outcome, because he didn't intend that. he's a positive thinking guy in a lot of ways about the outcome of his life.
I'm not as optimistic as you are that he feels that way. And I don't think it's mutually exclusive, that he never lost faith in himself, that he dug deep, that he made his life a life of meaning. Right? I don't think it's mutually exclusive that he's not traumatized and broken. And many of us are driven to do what we do and make our lives what they are because of early trauma and because of an ongoing relationship to that pain. So I think they can both be there. Yes, it's remarkable that he maintains this attitude and he rises every time like a phoenix from the ashes. I think for me, this test is really poignant. I think it's a real test.
Yeah.
I think he really wants to know. I think he wants to have a relationship with them. But he has to know that they've changed.
Yeah, but the point I was making was that there was a question of was he worried about
Benjamin's safety?
Hurting Benjamin. And that's where I was coming from.
Okay.
Saying, I didn't think he would have just said, no, that's not my intention, it's not going to happen, it's going to be fine with Benjamin. The test was elsewhere.
Right.
Well, I think that people, and I can think of things in my life, when pushed to the wall, and it's a matter of saving this or saving that, it could be money, it could be psychological, he's been pushed to the wall, you sacrifice someone to get what you want. And good, well-meaning people can be put in such a situation where they do that. The extreme is in concentration camps, when one Jew steals the food from another Jew, or whatever. You're put into a situation where you do things you never would have done.
So yes, what we said earlier, that Benjamin might just be collateral damage. There's things more important to Joseph right now than what Benjamin's feeling. But he orchestrates this. He's not pushed to the wall, right?
It's the psychological wall. With his brothers, it just brings it all back.
So like we said, maybe Benjamin is collateral damage. Okay. Because of what's going on for Joseph. Okay. So I know this sounds crazy. So what do we have? We have a divination cup, theft. The brothers say, let whoever it's found with die. Yeah? All right. Go back to Genesis 31. 31. No. Good question. Yes.
God stuck in the sack.
Yes.
31:31.
Yeah, 31:31.
31:31.
No.
Not that?
No.
Your father
It's
is deceived me.
31. It's got to be earlier than 31:31, right? All right. 31:19.
31:19.
What page?
172.
Genesis 31, verse 19.
Right.
I have been studying Torah, as I've told you before, for 27 years as an adult. And I never put these two things together. It's only because I was teaching you all this stuff from Mesopotamia, and I thought, how sad that I didn't get to do Rachel and the Traphim with them. So I thought, well, maybe we'll get through the Joseph stuff, and then, we'll talk a little bit so I can just, wrap it up with them about all these women and the Mesopotamian perspective. So I start, and I'm like, whoa, what? Meanwhile, Laban had gone to shear his sheep, and Rachel stole her father's household gods. Jacob kept Laban the Aramean in the dark, not telling him that he was fleeing. And he fled with all that he had. So they are on the road. She has taken the family gods, because if we read this from a Mesopotamian women's perspective, she's the youngest daughter. She would have inherited the mother's cultic status, and she would have inherited the idols that were used in cultic practice.
So
She's taking what's hers. Rachel's taking what she believes, if we're reading it like we have been from a Mesopotamian perspective, she's taking, because she's not Israelite. She's Canaanite. She's Mesopotamian. She's taking the cultic hardware that she needs to do what she needs to do in her household as the priestess. So they're fleeing, right? And then, of course, Lavan catches up to them, right? 25, Lavan overtook Jacob. 26, and Lavan said to Jacob, what is going on? Why did you flee in the middle of the night and mislead me? Right? You didn't even let me say goodbye to my family, blah, blah, blah. 31, Jacob answered Laban saying, I was afraid because I thought you would take your daughters from me by force. But anyone with whom you find your gods shall not remain alive. Dun, 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 dun. Joseph sets up the test to be exactly what happened to his mother. Dang, they're good. So Jacob says, let anyone with whom your household gods are found die. Joseph says they say the exact same thing, because thinking it's not possible, because we didn't do it, right? What?
Is there some commentary about Rachel took the trophim and something of divination, and the cup was also used for divination?
That's exactly where I'm going, right? So she has them, she puts them in a camel bag because she hears Laban coming to search the tents, and she sits on the camel bag, right? And then when he comes in and she says, sorry, Father, and she's got to be afraid, like if he finds them, she's in deep, deep doo-doo. So she's sitting on them, and when he comes in to search her tent, right, she's got to be freaking out, and she says, I'm sorry, forgive me for not rising before you, Father, but the way of women is upon me. And then he's like, ew, I'm out of here, right? Because it had all kinds of, all kinds of taboo, all kinds of stuff around that. Still does in some ways, right? But certainly then it had cultic implications. So he's like, ew, I don't even want to be in the same tent, right? So he goes out. So she's sitting on the trophim. She's sitting on this hardware that is about cultic practice, and that's exactly what Joseph puts in Benjamin's sack, is what they would perceive to be his hardware for his own. These are the trophim of their private household. These are their private gods. What does he put in Benjamin's sack? His own private divination cup. I have never linked those two things before, but I don't think there's any way to ignore the exact parallel that his mother, right, goes through this. And when he wants to set up a test for his brothers, right, about how they're going to treat Rachel's only other son, he sets up exactly a parallel scenario to what his mother happened.
How would you know about Rachel?
Well, possibly Rachel bragged about it. Possibly it became a family legend. Remember that time we were running away from my brother? And I took the trophim, and he thought he had me? Right?
Meanwhile, Rachel died giving birth to Benjamin.
Yeah. Yes.
But then they're talking about dying, whoever took these die. So there's another connection.
Okay. So possibly Rachel bragged about it. But even if Joseph doesn't know that story, we do. But I've never before put them together.
And that's never come up in the...
I've never heard any connection.
You need to write.
You've done it.
I said to Judy, I said, oh my gosh. Now maybe it's out there, but I've never heard that.
Don't tell anybody.
Shh. I'm going to turn off my microphone.
So you learn politics at home from your father or your mother, whomever you idolize with. And in that case, he's learning politics from his mother. How do you interpret that? And not the politics of his father. He goes for her line, for her style. How do you see that?
I think if we think about this in the terms that we've been looking at all of these women, I think Joseph is very close to his mother. And early in his life, she only has one son. Her whole life, she only has one child. She has one heir. Mm-hmm. Like we've been talking about heirs, and the heir's relationship to the priestess or the mother, right? And so she has one heir. So in her mind, Joseph's the one who will inherit. Like so, you can imagine she's teaching him and relating to him as her heir. And of course, she winds up being pregnant again and having a second son, but doesn't live to
Is it just
to raise him.
Look at the Mesopotamian culture and just say that this stealing a god is the ultimate sin? So Joseph didn't need to know this story to understand the culture that he came.
I think it's the opposite. I think Rachel isn't stealing anything. That's the patriarchal reconstruction. The Mesopotamian story, Rachel is taking what is hers. She's taking what is rightfully hers because she's the youngest daughter. She would have inherited it from her mother. Her mother's gone. We don't see her mother in the story. Presumably she's dead. So Rachel's as she's going to leave and build another household with Jacob, separate from Laban, she's got to take the Trophim. She's the cultic leader of the house. They're hers.
Might this prove that the person who concretized these two stories was the same person?
100%. I think the material absolutely is related. 100%. 100%. So it's, I would have to break down the source material by documentary hypothesis. I don't know what source.
Get going.
What source said it, right? Get on it.
What does Rachel do with these guys?
Yeah.
Well, the rabbis are very worried about it, right? So because we know Mesopotamian tradition, we don't have to worry, we're fine. But the rabbis were very upset. Why would she want them? Why would she need them? So, of course, they have to defend her, but God forbid she should be using them. So they say she's trying to save Laban from idolatry. So she takes them in order to keep Laban from being an idolater, which is great. If you're the rabbis and you have to defend what she's doing and not have her have any good relationship to the Trophim, then that's great. That's clever. But of course, we don't need to buy that, right? We don't need to excuse Rachel. I really believe that's an origin story of her having inherited those Trophim from her mother, and that she's taking that. Even if forget Mesopotamia, I just think she takes them because they're hers. But Torah certainly understands that Laban had a claim to them because they use the word steal. Torah uses the word steal. She stole them. But that could be because she was leaving and couldn't ask permission, so took them, or couldn't say to him, those are mine, right? So maybe that's what stealing means.
Torah is the patriarchal language.
But the patriarchal language of Torah says she stole them. And there was another one about, there's another commentary, Midrash, that says she took them so that Laban couldn't use them in divination to find out where they were. Right, so that she's afraid Laban will use them to find them because they're running away.
The GPS.
But that would suggest that she believes they're effective. Right, so
which is also a problem.
So that's a problem. So that's not the usual interpretation, right? Because that means she thinks they can be used in divination to find as a GPS.
Exit stage left at this point.
Say what?
These guys, Rachel's guys, once she took, just exit the story. They're gone. They have no continuing narrative.
No.
They're just gone.
Yeah, but most things are just gone, right? Right. We don't usually hear. Right, but we would have no reason to hear about the Trophim after this, right? We don't get descriptions of scenes in the house where they would have been used.
I think your point about the Torah not describing people's feelings in these stories is so poignant, because even though it doesn't describe them, they're so rich in the story.
Right.
It has to be.
Right. It sets up a lot of drama, but doesn't then explore right what the implications of that is.
So next week, do we get the rest of it?
I know.
Yeah. Right? Dun, 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 dun. All right. So look at 2:18. That second paragraph. Joseph is not ready, right? Joseph is not ready to reveal himself to them. So this is at the height of our story that just happened. But our anticipation of this great revelation is whetted by their arrival, by the arrival of the brothers. He, quote, acted like a stranger and spoke harshly to them when he originally encounters them. The phrase acted like a stranger announces his assumption of a theatrical part, but the part that he plays is paradoxically the part that he has been living, for he has been the stranger all along. The harshness he feigns is linked to a harshness he feels. In this moment, he must recognize anew that he is an outsider, both to the culture of his birth and to that of his assimilation. In Joseph, we revisit the myth of the stranger, not as the God-called nomad who belongs nowhere, but as the orphan of history. Right? So Jacob people might be wandering and they're kind of the embodiment of the stranger, but it's a myth about, God calls them and they're called into wandering. We'll think about Moses, right? The hero story where he's like, and Peter Pitzela is saying, not for Joseph. This is not a myth like that. This is about him being an orphan of history.
And so many of the heroes or the leading characters in the stories are orphans in one sense.
100%. Disguised, Joseph further disguises himself. He pretends ignorance, feigns a part. The suspense of the ensuing drama builds as we await the disclosure of his identity, the moment when he throws off his acting and lets his brothers see that he is, under the trappings, only Joseph. Long lost, now found. From this moment forward until the point when he can sustain the part no longer, Joseph is both an actor and an improvisational dramaturge, a psychodramatist, if you will, who sets scenes, lays plots, devises ordeals for his unwitting brothers. Using his immense power, he stages their reality. Ironically, however, Joseph is unaware of a larger drama that enfolds him and within which he acts a part beyond the one he conceives. A greater power is moving in and through him. Though we are reading the myths of a culture with no formal theatrical conventions, we are in the presence of a profoundly theatrical imagination. There is a dizzying sense of plays within plays. As he acts the stranger, the soundless turning of hidden gears, the deus ex machina, begins to act on him and moves him toward atonement. So Joseph is acting. He's the one setting everything up. He's the great puppet master. But of course, the author, we know, because we're coming from the omniscient narrator's perspective, we know there's a bigger puppet master than Joseph even knows. Even though Joseph has a relationship with God, we know that. He says, all this power comes from God to interpret dreams. So I'm not saying he doesn't have a relationship with the divine, but he's so clear that he's the one making all this happening and turning all the gears. And it's like, what Peter Pitzela is saying is, we, the reader, know, you're playing your own part in a drama that you didn't write.
So when I said that he was rejoicing in control over the situation, he may have been, but the atonement came later, realizing he was not in control. And I guess that's where all atonement comes from.
Right? So that atonement begins as Joseph stages a theater of revenge. And of course he's going to move.
Does Pitzela say Joseph has an epiphany here, or is it just he's a puppet being...
Right now, he thinks he's in control and manipulating everything, and Peter Pitzela is saying, but Joseph doesn't realize he's actually being used by God for God's own purposes, right? That he's not in control, right, of everything. Go to 2:19. And this, so Pitzl is looking at all the intricacies of, the brothers return home and tell their father everything that has occurred, but so attached is the old man to his youngest son that only after all their rations are exhausted will Jacob finally part with Benjamin. And then with the greatest fear and reluctance, the brothers return with him to ransom Simeon. So Pitzl is exploring all the incredible tensions and loves and sadnesses and Jacob's love for Joseph in some ways destroyed Joseph.
Right.
And now Jacob hasn't learned anything, it seems. Jacob is hanging on to Benjamin as the beloved, the same way he held on to Joseph. So Joseph has grown because he was separated from that. Right? Who knows what Joseph would have become had he stayed under his father's constant adoration.
Right.
But he's separated from that. And it seems that Jacob continues to do the same thing with Benjamin, and probably even worse because of what happened to Joseph, right? And so Pitzl is lifting up, there's so many crevices in which there's deep stuff going on that if when we look at this text, we have to imagine all of that is there before Joseph comes out.
Is that possibly why the Torah for this one time has made this reference to Joseph's sadness, his grief, but brings it into the personal? Is that part of what this is saying?
So what are you saying?
Well, I'm just trying to figure out, you said that the Torah rarely talks about emotions, and in this case they are. So it is. So it's setting, I don't know, I'm not sure. I'm just trying to find out what is the correlation to the Torah separating this so succinctly. I
think it says something about the intensity of this situation. Mm-hmm. People have cried. We've had Hagar. When are the moments we get something about emotion? Hagar's son dying, and she's howling, in anguish, right? So those are the moments Torah seems to give us crying, weeping, and this is an incredibly, I think Torah using it here is a way for it to really punch it that Joseph is absolutely overcome. I think it's about the intensity of this for Joseph that Torah uses weeping here, and being overcome. The Torah tells us that is a really strong indicator about how intense it is.
Is it likely that he's going to do revenge when he's emotionally so attacked by this?
Meaning
that there seem to be two issues. One is he's trying to get a situation of revenge, which is best served cold. But the other thing is that he is emotionally devastated. He sees how his brothers are. Maybe they've grown. Maybe they lamented that they dumped him into a pit. So there seem to be two different sorts of things. You don't weep and mourn if you're trying to get revenge. So I'm just having difficulty to see which side this can come down.
I don't think Joseph is getting revenge. I think there is a part of him that wants to hurt them, right? And if there's revenge here, that's it. That he's now in control, he now has power, and he screws with them, right? So and he hurts them, right? He gets them all worked up and all flipped out, and so I think that is the element of revenge if there is one. I think his ultimate goal is reunification, and his ultimate goal is to come back together with them, but he's got to work through so much stuff to get there. And the biggest point he has to get to is, are they worthy of reunify. I don't want to unify with them if they'd leave Benjamin here. If they're the same people that did that to me, then screw them. I don't want. Who needs that, right? But if they've changed over 20 years, then. And looking at them, they must be different, like in some ways. And if they've really changed, then I think he really, really longs for unification. Remember, he's been orphaned. His mother dies giving birth to his brother, and then his father's taken from him. And, so I think he's searching. He's really searching for a way to fill that gap.
That's a form of teshuvah.
Linda?
I'm not so sure that revenge is the right word. I think it's more anger. And there's a difference, at least in my mind. The anger is his emotional feeling, whereas revenge is what he's been plotting and planning to get back at them. That's different from testing them to see if they can. And he wants his own emotional feelings to also be addressed. He wants to get rid of the anger.
I think it's just, I think it's really torture. He's tortured. I don't. It's not simple. Right? I don't think it's this or it's that or so. I think it's a mess. It doesn't get messier than this. And all of it's going on. Love, fear, anger, a desire for revenge, but I'm not going to hurt them, but I'm going to play with them, but they'll think I'm going to hurt. I mean, it's like really, I don't think Joseph's clear about a lot of his motivation here, right? I think there's so much that's below the surface for all of us, but particularly family, right? Yeah. And particularly family betrayal and trauma.
And early childhood.
And early childhood trauma.
Isn't he an interpreter of dreams?
Mm-hmm.
This is like a dream in essence.
Right? So Joseph, the great interpreter, is caught in his own drama, right? And he who's pulling all the strings is really serving the one capital O who's pulling all the strings.
Right. I think if it was pure revenge, he could just kill them.
Yes. Right. Or he would just take Benjamin and say, you live with it now. See how it feels now. 100%. This is not a story of revenge. There may be a temptation, right, to inflict suffering in return, but or out of his own suffering. But this is definitely not a story about
So is the
revenge.
meaning here that Joseph is a sick and confused human, and it took God to change Joseph to make him welcoming and say, I want to save the family? If God had intervened, Joseph could have discarded all of it and just kept it.
Well, God doesn't exactly intervene. Right? Pitzela is saying that God is pulling the strings. But I think Joseph is confused. I think this is the ultimate story of how complicated our relationships are. Like I said, particularly when there's trauma, particularly when there's betrayal by family, and what it means to try to figure out who we are and who we want to be outside of just reacting to that pain or the longing, right? Joseph is trying to figure out, I think, who he wants to be in relationship to that. Sheldon?
He wants to show his power over them too, because he was.
Sure, because of course, it's all there. Because look, the story wouldn't be nearly as interesting if he weren't this powerful. The story's interesting because he does have power to slaughter them all on sight, right? That's what makes this so compelling, is because he could and he doesn't, right? He could off with his head and then watch how they behave. All right, now bring me Simeon. Right? He could, if that's what this was really about. He could, but it's clear that what makes it compelling for me is that he could do that, and it's all about his own trying to figure out, with everything he could do, what is he going to do?
And who is he?
And who is he?
As much as Joseph is an interpreter of dreams, I also see him as a dreamer. If I were in his shoes, I would have waited for 20 years to set the scene up. I would have dreamt about it. Mm-hmm. Yeah. He scripted it for a long time. He probably had visions about it. He's a writer. I mean, he wrote the scene, he set the scene, and he played it. He enjoyed it. But he.
So he's right, like she said, like it says here, and an improvisational dramaturge. Like he's an improvisational actor right now, going, whoa, okay, right? He's the dreamer, he's the creative, he has an imagination, right? And so possibly he has fantasized. If they were to show up here tomorrow, right? Like I used to fantasize as a kid. If my birth mother showed up and said, I want her back.
He probably killed them in one scene.
Set them up in the birth order.
Well, that's really interesting, Mehmet, that possibly the reason he doesn't need to take revenge is because he's lived it over and over and over. And then when they're actually standing there, he's like, well, wait, is that really what I want to do? Did it really make me feel better to imagine Simeon's head coming off his shoulders? Like, did that really get me anywhere?
So finish that sentence you started. If my birth mother showed up and wanted me back.
The fantasy was, what would I say?
Yeah.
How would I prove my loyalty to my adoptive mother? You set up these crazy scenes to work through, right? Stuff.
To the complications, one of his motivations may have been to protect Benjamin from the bad effects of being the favorite child.
So you're agreeing over here with Ms. Crone. You're agreeing with him that his interest is to shield Benjamin, right, from the same thing that happened to him. All right. So I want you to go home and think about what is the connection between this and Hanukkah. Shabbat Shalom.
You've been listening to Rabbi Amy Bernstein's Friday morning Torah study from Kehillat Israel in Pacific Palisades, California. For more information, go to our website, www.ourki.org.